So thank you for that wonderful intro. This is actually a great mic. I always have mic trouble on these podiums because I'm 6'1" minus heels, so I usually don't wear them. So as he said, my name is Tamara James. I'm a developer advocate for a company called Platform 9 Systems, and I'm a developer advocate for their product, which is a function as a service called Fission. Has anyone ever heard of Fission? It's built on top of Kubernetes. And they're actually based right in Sunnyvale. I'm also an iOS engineer, and I'm a founder of a group called Technigal which encourages women to explore opportunities, learning opportunities, employment opportunities in STEM. So coding workshops, go to hackathons together, panels, you name it. We do it all. So the topic of today's talk is Swift for Objective-C OGs. And as we discussed before the talk, I definitely need to clarify what OG means. The intent behind my using of it was original gangsta. And original gangsta makes you, it's just really, it makes you a cool person. It means that, hey, you have some experience under your belt. You've been here, you've been around the block, you're wise. So that's what an OG is, in relativity. So this is a talk for people who are already familiar with Objective-C, so it's an Objective-C friendly intro to Swift. Also, we're going to be doing some language comparisons between Objective-C and Swift, and we're going to go through kind of the story behind the battle between the two languages and the ultimate fate of both languages. So it should be fun. First of all, welcome to all the OGs. I could not start without the welcome. And if you're still trying to figure out whether you're an OG or not, it doesn't have to mean that you started when, back in 91, using Objective-C, when the App Store first launched, you were already ahead. No, but if your first introduction to building for Apple products was using Objective-C instead of Swift, then you can consider yourself an Objective-C OG, even if that was last year. So welcome to all my OGs. So for those of you who are not OGs, and for those of you who need a little refresher, I want to briefly get into a bit of history for Objective-C. A little bit of background. Objective-C was created in the 80s, back when Steve Jobs was being a rebel, got kicked out of his own company, built a new one called Next. They had an operating system called Next Step, and Objective-C was the primary language for that operating system. Objective-C added the object orientation to the C language, so hence Objective-C. I thought that was pretty clever. And it's been the primary language for building for iOS and OS X products for the past 4 decades now. Let's get into some pros of that. Anytime you have a legacy language like that, you can definitely expect lots of documentation, right? Lots of support for it, so it's really well established, right? And if you're coming from a C background, it's really easy to just kind of fall into the syntax and the rhythm of Objective-C, right? So on the other hand, if you're not coming from a C background, it can be a little bit tricky, right? It's a little bit uneasy on the eyes. The logic is it's really verbose and really just intensive in its styling. So, for me, it was really hard, not coming from a C background, just to kind of catch on to the syntax. Also, another con is the fact that it was built by Apple, and it was maintained by Apple. So we have, as developers, we have no say-so as it pertains to the roadmap for the language, as it pertains to issues, things of that nature. All we can kind of do is kind of complain. If you're not an Apple employee or on that team, you really don't have any reach or any influence as it pertains to the progress of the language. And again, pertaining to exclusivity, you can only build with Objective-C via Apple's IDE, which is Xcode. So when we're talking about this theory of exclusivity, there's this concept out there amongst developers, amongst general consumers as well of Apple products, is like there's this King Apple concept, right? So you can only build for Apple products with Apple languages using Apple's IDE. So there's just this totality and exclusivity that creates a barrier, especially like for developers. And that was until 2014. And that is when Swift was born and launched and shook up the world, right? So Swift was here, and it was here to stay, and I like to call Swift Yonsei, because that is exactly how it premiered to us as the developer community. And it was sexy. It was so sexy that all the publications, everyone, all the developer communities, they were raving about it from the moment it launched. So the day, the week, the entire year of the launch was, it was crazy. The developer communities, so for some of you who remember that time, it was all about Swift, right? So what made it so sexy to us? Syntax was number one. There's a lot of syntax similarities between a lot of universal languages that we use, right? So similarities in styling when it comes to JavaScript and Python. So it was catchy. It was easy to kind of fall into, especially for beginners, right? So people who had never touched Objective-C, it was really easy for them to just fall into Swift. And Swift was also proving faster performance. Also, I think the top thing also was the fact that you can write less code. So raise your hand if you're down for writing less code. Right? All developers, right? So, and we'll get into a little bit, throughout the talk, how in Objective-C, it might take us 10, 20 lines of code to do one thing. That same thing, we can do that 3 to 8 lines of code with Swift. So that definitely caught the developer's eye because, hey, we get tired. We get tired, and any way to simplify, our process and speed up the development process, whether you're building for a business or you're just a developer, this is definitely a huge benefit. Also, Swift is definitely known for its preventative and protective style. So it prides itself on preventing memory leaks as it's kind of integrated with ARC. So when you compile, ARC kind of does the magic for you, as opposed to Objective-C. When you're programming in Objective-C, you're constantly thinking about memory management, right? Instead of building the next feature and things of that nature, you're always thinking about memory, and you're always cautious about it. So down here, I just have a really simple example, just a declaration of a variable in Objective-C. And if you notice on the right with Swift, we have this thing that I thought was so annoying starting out with Swift, is that pesky exclamation point, right? And it was giving me so many errors, and I was like, what is this? Why do I need it? This is annoying, right? And little did I know that was Swift protecting me from myself, right? So, when you have a value and it's, it turns out to be nil, that could lead to crashing, that could lead to memory leaks, and that exclamation point, or what we call optionals, that provides that barrier for you, for your program not to crash. So, so it prides itself on being a super protective and cautious language. So we'll get into syntax differences next and similarities. And I do want to, as I was putting this together, I was thinking, I was like, I should put a warning out. Like, I'm not trying to persuade you, I'm not trying to like sell Swift to you. I'm just trying to introduce you, put your toe in the water. But I was lying to myself. That's exactly what I'm doing. I love Swift, and this is from me being an Objective-C OG myself, and really hating the process of transitioning from Objective-C to Swift and going through the growing pains. But now that I've seen the other side, I'm destined and I am determined to bring you all over with me. So the first thing I want to get into is properties. So of course, when we use properties in Objective-C, it's like a convenient way to create both a variable and the getter and setter method for those variables so that we can access it outside of the class. And this is kind of already done for us with Swift. It's done by default. The getter and setter method is created by default, but the similarity is that dot syntax for accessing variables, right? So we have the person. We have the person here, and then we're able to. We have the person object, and then we're able to reach that variable through the dot syntax. Also, initialization. Now, the main thing that I really want to point out through all of these slides is really just syntax and ease of use, right? So every time we're declaring a new variable, we have to allocate the memory and initialize it. If we want to initialize it with a value, we have to alloc init with name. It's just really redundant. It's really verbose. And then in Swift, it's just a lot simpler. It's very easy on the eyes as far as readability goes. So we just make an instance in Swift, let my friend equals person. So and that creates our instance of the person object. So really simple. And now custom initializers. Again, this just looks like a bunch of boilerplate code, right? You have just so much default boilerplate code when it comes to Objective-C. But when you've been doing it for years, this has been the main language that you've been using. There was no other option. You kind of got used to it, right? So writing these lines of code, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of code, and then on the right-hand side, 3 lines of code, and the third line is the closing bracket. So so when I began to look into the documentation, I began to look at tutorials and things of that nature, and play around with it, I was realizing what all the rave was about. Oh, and I just wanted to point out something too. I want you to notice that, so the parameter name is internal in Swift, as opposed to external with Objective-C. And the same syntax applies for like class and instance methods. So for initializing and for class and instance methods in Swift, the parameter is internal as opposed to external in Objective-C. So methods. Of course, we know Objective-C uses the square brackets for method calls. Swift is free of that. And self is it's always necessary in Objective-C when you're declaring a method or when you're calling a method. For Swift, we really don't use it that often. If you don't explicitly write self, it assumes that you're referring to a property or method of the current instance. So yeah, we just have a simple, method call, passing in a string, and basically it's just less syntax, and it creates a better visual as far as readability goes. And readability is really important, especially when you have people taking on legacy code, when you have people who are new to the language, or even people that are new to programming as a whole, I found. Especially when you come across people who don't comment, this really helps. So then something else happened in 2015. It became open sourced. Swift became open sourced in 2015, just a year after its birth, and people's minds were blown. They couldn't believe that Apple actually let down their pride and let the doors open and allowed people, developers, to contribute to the language. And this set a new tone of trust between the developer community and Apple and themselves. This set a new tone of just community. It grew the community, and it made people want to learn more about Swift. So just opening those doors and making it open source, that really, really took everything to a new level. So what are we talking about, right? Now, this is a picture of Try Swift. Has anyone attended a Try Swift conference here? You really should. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Natasha the Robot, actually, she organizes some of the Try Swift, so she might have founded it. I don't know. You can ask her. I think she's right after me. So you have entire conferences built around Swift, entire communities built around Swift, the roadmap around what people would like to see, and now it's becoming even more of a possibility now that those gates are open. So now the community is super interactive, and it opened doors for more possibilities as it pertains to the potential of Swift. So when you have people of different experience levels, different backgrounds, you have people just starting in Swift, you have people coming from Objective-C, other languages, and people all come together and contribute and add their input. Now, again, you're taking it to the next level. It made it easier, better, faster, stronger. To this day, I think it's really surpassed even my expectations for the language, especially just being 4 years old at this point. I want to talk about Swift on industry level. So with this new wave of Swift, right? So we talked about the effect that Swift, the open sourcing of Swift has had on the development community. We talked a little bit about the benefits, the technical benefits of having Swift and utilizing Swift when building products. This is very, very key when it comes to people who are building products like enterprise, but especially startups. Now, enterprise, there, people like, the Googles, people like, just the major entities. Of course, their mobile products, they're a bit upset right now because now the migration period has begun, and now they're trying to wrestle and tussle and try to migrate all of their legacy code slowly but surely into Swift. Now, the startups have the advantage of starting their products, they can start over, or they can just say, hey, if startup A wanted to build a mobile product tomorrow, they can start with Swift. So they're kind of technically, they're kind of ahead of the Swift curve. So now startups are looking for Swift developers. I've seen the amount of demand for developers with Swift and Swift-related skills rise drastically. So now the industry is responding. Now we need Swift developers. We need someone with, and so I've seen it in areas that I didn't think that I would even see it, in industries that I would think that I would see it. So now this is, again, it's opening up on a community level, and now on an industry level. I've been talking about Swift all this time. Swift this, Swift that. It's great. What about Objective-C? Our precious Objective-C that's gotten us this far, verbose and complex and unstable as it may have been, right? So what does this mean for Objective-C? This is my opinion. What about it? What about it? At this point, what about it? Now we have this progressive language, right, that we are collectively building. It's getting better. It's getting stronger. It's solving a lot of the problems that we were having with Objective-C, especially on the memory side. That was a huge thing. Easy to read, easy for people who need to just pick up the skill on the spot. We're hiring new developers, and we need to just have them take maybe 6 weeks to learn something. This is definitely something that I see taking over and potentially taking the place of Objective-C. Now, I myself, I'm ashamed to say, I missed the keynote on Monday. But any of you guys can tell me, was anything mentioned about Objective-C? Nothing. Nothing new regarding Objective-C. Was anything mentioned about Swift? Lots of new things. So I think that the fate of Objective-C is it's ultimately already written. And to add more insult to injury, now Swift has become server-side. What does that mean, right? Oh my gosh, our precious Objective-C, what is happening? So now we have a language, right, that was developed by Apple, that's now being developed by Apple in conjunction with the community, the developer community, with the ability to transcend beyond just Apple, right? Now we're into the serverless realm, and I don't know if you've heard, but serverless is taking over for the 99 and 2000s. That was a joke. But seriously, so now we're talking about switching gears and transcending beyond just Apple. And again, that's Apple, opening, that's another layer of the barrier that was there before, opening once again. And now, so what does this mean? Now we can use it with multiple IDEs. So now I don't even have to have Xcode, use Sublime, Atom, Code Runner, you name it. Because now I don't even have to use Swift for just iOS. So now it's not just an Apple language anymore. Now this is a real threat to the future of Objective-C, but it's promising for developers all over. Future, Swift is easy. Swift is now open sourced. Swift is server-side. And now, again, with the community being in control and able to contribute and continue to build and progress and have immediate reach into the product, into the roadmap of the language, the possibilities are definitely endless. So I would encourage all of you Objective-C OGs to kindly attend the labs that are here at the conference. There are multiple publications. These are some of my favorite. We Heart Swift. Lovely publication, lots of tutorials, lots of documentation. I don't know if you've heard of Ray Wenderlich. Oh man, I always think I'm murdering his last name. Wenderlich. Right, is it Wenderlich? Wenderlich. Oh, okay, maybe we'll have a talk after this. He'll want to hit me up after that. Hacking with Swift, which is our dear Paul Hudson. I believe he spoke this morning. He has an awesome site with lots of tutorials on Swift. Of course, Apple's Swift documentation in itself. And also, I do teach Swift as well. You can go to my GitHub and check out some starter level projects. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I'll be happy to answer them, especially with me knowing the growing pains of transitioning from Objective-C into Swift. I can definitely identify with that, and I'll be happy to help in any way that I can. And that is my presentation. Thank you. Now, I said I was going to take questions after. Like, I love to shake people's hands. I love to meet people. I said I was going to come down and take questions. But if you have one or two, I could take some up here. Hi. Oh, she raised her hand first. Hi. What do I miss about Objective-C? Okay. Well, I was actually having a talk from my new friend over at Cloudinary. His name is Dan. And he was telling me, he's like, yeah, I used to be an iOS developer, and I came from Objective-C. And once Swift got here, I said, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I won't cross. I can't. Listen, he sounded like me a couple years ago. I said, no, sounds like a trick. Sounds like it's something, a trap, it's unstable, like, especially when they open sourced it. I wasn't immediately excited. I had to, tiptoe in. But he said that he loved the fact that it was really verbose. He liked the fact that everything had to be spelled out. Everything had to be to the T. Everything had to be almost redundant. And sometimes when it helps when you're understanding the logic of something to have to keep doing it, right? You have to keep repeating, this is, I'm allocating memory to this. I need to do this. This is a classmate. And sometimes that helps visually when you're defining the logic of something. So that's something that I do miss, actually, the verboseness. In terms of, because I know that's how I learned. But once I got into Swift and saved me 50% of time, I was like, okay. So yeah, I drank the Kool-Aid, but I won't give up on Objective-C, even though I'm selling you guys the Kool-Aid. I won't give up on Objective-C until it's actually deprecated. And we'll see just how long that might be.
The fact that Swift keeps changing once a year, to a new version, and it's like I never really know when to kind of dig in. And also, have you ever played with or have any resources for reactive Swift, reactive Cocoa, which is fascinating to me, but I haven't really learned much about it.
Yeah. So the first question was what do I think about the fact that Swift keeps changing every year, right? So this is a pain point when you have so many people, they're excited to contribute. These are great contributions. They're like, yes, let's accept this PR. Yes, so now there's a new change, not even just every year. I would say every 6 months, there's a new change within Swift. And for people that are just hopping on, that is a pain point. That is kind of a pain point. And that, again, coming from Objective-C, that was something that scared me too, coming over from Objective-C, which was so stable, so established, everything was well-defined. Like, at this point, after 40 years, what else are you gonna change? And, I think that people will adapt. At some point, there will be some default, like, main version of Swift, and then there will be, I think there will be less, the changes will be farther apart. But it's still kind of finding itself, right? It's still brand new. It's 4 years old, and it's still kind of finding itself and defining itself, which is exciting, but it's also scary for newcomers. So I do understand that. And then the second question was reactive code. So are you talking about React.js? Are you talking reactive Swift? And I'm not familiar with that. Okay, anybody familiar with reactive Swift? Oh, okay. So what do I think about it, or have I played around with? Yeah, I haven't played around with it. I haven't played around with it. But yeah, yeah. So Swift is, when it comes to resources and when it comes to development, it seems like, again, there's this blessing and a curse of the possibilities being endless. And the possibilities keep growing and changing really fast. And that is the pain point. But that's also the exciting point. Any other questions? Yep.
That would force you to use Swift because it cannot be done anymore in Objective-C? Have you ever come across something like that?
I think when it came to certain libraries and maybe certain APIs that have not yet made the transition, but in which case you can use a bridging header for that. So you're able to use them, interchangeably, and integrate them with each other. So that is a great thing. That is really key for transition. Because there are definitely still a lot of libraries and a lot of APIs that have not made that transition. So that can be difficult, but it can be fixed once you figure out the bridging header situation, which is super simple once you practice. Anything else? Yep.
If Gil Scott Heron was still around, is there any reason why he wouldn't use Swift?
If who?
Gil Scott Heron.
Gil Scott Heron.
I thought that was a reference in your slide to the song Grandma's Hands.
Oh, oh yeah. Okay, yeah. Would he? What was the question?
Is there any reason why he wouldn't be using Swift?
Why he wouldn't use Swift?
Is there any reason you can think of why he would not? The
Why?
answer is no. He would be using Swift.
Why he wouldn't be using Swift?
He would.
He would, but is there any reason I could think of that he would not?
Yes.
You know what? Not off the top. Not off the top.
So that's why everybody should be using Swift.
And you know what? But it's good to think about, though. It's like, it's good to think about, like, is there any case where, like, Swift wouldn't be relevant, or is there anything else, any other tooling or any other language that could replace? And then you have, like, React sneaking in, for the people who really don't want to jump all the way in, and they're like, oh, I'm cool with JavaScript. So, and they don't want to drink the Swift Kool-Aid, but still build for iOS. So, yeah.
So I actually had a question about Swift's deployment story, which is I've avoided it to this point because my understanding is we have to ship the Swift standard library alongside of our apps. Is that still true? And how much longer is that going to be true? Do we have a feel for the runtime? I'm sorry.
Hi, sorry. So it's not the standard library, it's a runtime because there is no binary compatibility yet. That is why there's a lot of talk on the internet that Swift is not binary compatible and so on. So I think it has something to do with the linking, but basically you have to ship like about 5 megs with your app so that that can happen. And they've promised in the keynote that Swift 5 will have binary compatibility, so you won't have to have that wait, but that will come next year.
Yeah, that's good because most of my apps aren't even a meg, so like adding 5 megs to them for a new language. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for answering that. And I have to also, and I was wondering too if they mentioned it in the keynote. So I have to go back. Bad iOS too. I have to watch the live stream back.
They did mention it.
Okay, cool.
Hi, I was wondering if you have any like war stories from converting an Objective-C app to Swift, especially for an enterprise. And I guess second part of my question, like I'm fully on the Swift bandwagon, but my friends who are working full-time in Objective-C say like, well, if we were to compile, like it would just take so long to compile our app, like performance-wise, it would take longer to compile or it would be slower for our users still. So I wonder if you have any antidote.
Slower with Swift?
Yeah.
That is false. Yeah, so the first part of your question was war story. I think I have two main war stories, and that was me trying to. It was me trying to learn Swift, and I felt like the fastest way for me to do that was to still use Objective C, and then maybe integrate a few Swift libraries and try to. And yeah, there were some things that they just broke. Like they just broke. And mainly because and but you know what, and it was in the early days of Swift, and that's why I was reluctant too. I was like, Swift is brand new, I know it's breaking all over the place, and I don't want it to break my stable code. Like, everything is set, everything is factored, like, and that's just what it did. So it took me a while so it would have taken me more than a talk that's why I say just attend some of the workshops here today. Really just, whatever you can do to dip your toe in, because that's what it takes. Dip your toe in first, and then kind of walk slowly, especially when it comes to enterprise, because I'm sure a lot of that's been happening. So they've been doing a lot of testing, with a lot of big enterprises. So that's why the transition is so slow and so steady. But I see, again, a lot of people, they're looking for folks with like Swift experience to help them with that integration. So yeah. Oh, over here? Yep.
Would you recommend going from the ground up rewrite, or would you, with Swift as it is now, would you recommend that incremental approach that you tried when you first started converting?
Definitely do it in increments. And it also depends on not only the complexity of your project, but the importance, right? So if you have something that's already deployed out there, definitely, microservice your way up. But when it comes to, if it's something that's super simple, it might not be out there on the market, or you may have a product that doesn't have, too many downloads yet, or you may, there are certain situations that are more mild than not, but definitely as a whole, again, like dipping your toe in is the best bet. So if you're going to build something from the ground up, I would say do something on the side, and then slowly, kind of bring it into your project. Any other questions? Okay, I love to talk to people anyway, so like if you see, like when I come down, I want to shake people's hands and things of that nature. Ask me questions, bug me. I'm here, so that was my talk. Thank you.